I don't have a contact with the YMCA. I did email outreach. I did a phone call, so we will trust that they will join as soon as they are able to. So what I will do, though, we do want to make sure that we can test audio so we can hear you and that we can see you if it's appropriate. And so I think you're kind of used to the methodology. I will call out a name and then I'll forecast a couple of names ahead so you can get prepared. Neil, your staff, so you're always going to get picked on first. So there's your warning. But maybe what we'll just share is, what is a winter? Actually, where did you grow up? Maybe we'll do that since we've already heard from Bill Knudsen and Mike Erickson a little bit about where they grew up. Neil, so if you would just tell us your name, your role, and then where did you grow up, and maybe something interesting about where you were raised. So we'll go Neil, then Vicki, and then Bill. You have to tell your story twice.
Neil Brenneman, Maplewood Parks and Recreation. I grew up in Oakdale and St. Paul area, and then moved to Grant Township for a couple of years, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, moved a lot, but in the small inner, in those kind of.
Where'd you graduate high school then, Neil?
Tartan.
At where?
Tartan.
Okay.
So, I don't know. That's about it, man.
Thank you, Neil. Vicki, then Bill, then Mike.
Hey, everyone. I grew up on the west side of St. Paul, and when I was nearing the end of my high school, my family moved to Little Canada. So now I live in Maplewood.
Good. Your audio sounds good. Thank you. Bill, then Mike, then Aaron, please.
Oh, Bill Knudsen, City Council. I grew up in Brooklyn Center. Mike and I had shared some stories about that earlier, but anyhow.
Good. Thank you. Audio sounds good. Mike, then Aaron, then Nolan, please.
Mike Erickson. I grew up in Mike Erickson from the Maplewood Historical Society and the Broad Heritage Farm. I grew up in South Brooklyn Park and graduated from Osseo High School.
Thank you. Aaron, then Nolan, then Beth, please.
Hey, Aaron Wolf. I grew up in Rochester. My parents are the only ones who didn't work at the Mayo Clinic, believe it or
not. Good to know. Good qualifier. It's a rare feat, I think. Nolan, then Beth, and then Bryce, please.
Nolan Cornell, the South St. Paul Youth Boys Basketball. I'm going to be the outlier, the only one not originally from Minnesota. I grew up in Iowa and Virginia. I split time. So Minnesota was a shorter drive than Alaska. So I settled down here.
Excellent. Beth, then Bryce, then Bao, please.
Hey, my name is Beth Wattrud. I'm with NEU Soccer Club. I actually grew up in North St. Paul, in between Cowan Elementary and Maplewood Middle School. And then I graduated from Tartan, 1996.
Excellent. Thank you. You sound good. Bryce, then Bao, please.
Yeah, Bryce Sheeran, City Little Canada, Parks and Rec Director, and I grew up in Little Canada.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead, Bao. Sorry.
Yeah, hi, everyone. This is Bao. I grew up in St. Paul and graduated from Johnson.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Like I said, we still don't have the YMCA yet, but we've got emails from two of them. So one of them I think is going to be getting on shortly. What I do want to do is I'll share my screen just briefly so we can go through the agenda tonight. Everybody, I think, can see that. And, so really this is after our conversation last week, we really, I think, framed up the issues that we wanted to talk about. We just really wanted to understand, we recognize that the YMCA and the Maplewood Community Center is a key partner in all of this conversation. And I think it's really important that we have a sense for where they are at, both in terms of their operation pre-COVID, their operation in COVID, and then what we hope to be, or what we get a sense for what their operation will be post-COVID, which, if you saw the news this week, they're, progressing towards a vaccine. And so I don't know how long it takes to make 660 million doses of a vaccine, but I would imagine it would take some amount of time for invention, production, and distribution. So Bill could probably give us a sense that it might be a long time before you can deliver that many doses to folks, but it does seem that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so understanding what the YMCA thinks about long-term, I think is really important. And then the other thing that I really want to talk about tonight is really starting to frame up what the recommendations will look like. As you know, the Nature Center Task Force meets at the same sequence of time, and they have really sort of settled on 6 broad categories of recommendation. I think some level, depending on the conversation of tonight, I think a recommendation of around 6 key areas probably seems right for this group as well. But I've been furiously taking notes and trying to organize this information as best as I can. So this meeting, depending on how long the YMCA talks, could be short, it could be long, but as I said, I'm here to make sure that the process works and the information that you need flows. The other thing I wanted to pull up very quickly, if I can, is kind of a recap of our previous meeting. Neil, I think, did a really great job of sort of framing up what the issues were from other communities and kind of how they organize their programs. And so what I'll do is I'm going to share my screen one more time. Again, these are not minutes in the sense that they look like a city council minute, but they do try to capture some of the conversation. And so again, Neil and Audra have kind of talked through what peer cities do, really divided the work into sort of 4 categories: youth athletics and youth programs, then adult athletics and adult programs. And then we had this comparison chart, which understandably was hard to follow, so I'll make it larger on the screen. But we went through some other examples around the communities. Some places have a YMCA, some have a really robust community education program, some do fee-for-service, some are run by associations. So we really got a cool cross-section of how some of this works. And I think what I tried to capture was some of the discussion after that presentation. Really, members wanting to know what are the pricing models and which ones add the most value. What about a consortium or a cooperative model? I think there was a conversation around what is the goal? Is it really healthy communities or is it access to opportunities? And so this is a way to sort of frame this conversation. We talked about structure and how different communities specialize in different options. There was a lot of benefits, a lot of perceived benefits to a collaborative approach. And we really wanted to hear from the YMCA. We really wanted to hear from the school districts. And so I'll stop sharing. I think maybe one of the questions that I'll ask Neil, did you, in your outreach to your other cities, did you hear back from any that you had maybe done some outreach to or reflected differently on kind of the research that you did and what you and your peers are doing in the region?
As far as just kind of feedback in the process, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed to be just the majority that I talked to had most of the conversations was kind of their relationship with the associations and good, bad, or indifferent. Most of them didn't seem to. From my other meetings I've had, there's not regarding this task force specifically, but on the other management, the MRPA meetings, there's sometimes can be issues with that relationship. But the ones I talked to in relation to this one seem to have had no issues or working relationship that seemed to work fine. And then the community ed piece too, but no, there wasn't really, I guess, any anti one way or another sentiment. I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not. I guess it was kind of, it seemed, I was expecting one of them to, for people to have experience in other communities with other operations and maybe a more positive or negative experience with both, but I didn't seem to get that kind of feedback. But again, it wasn't a comprehensive conversation with some of them either. So.
Well, Neil, I just want to say is that, obviously we work together, but I appreciate how thorough that sort of summary was and kind of the thoughtfulness behind some of those materials. I think that was really great. So does anyone have any questions for Neil that they, thought of, or something that resonated with them that they want to ask? Because he's here, he's available.
Just a comment, Neil, that is, the information was incredibly valuable to us, and at least we're seeing how other municipalities are doing it. Do you continue to monitor, and is anybody reopening in any way that you have heard of? And I'm talking, because I get a lot of information, and how are the hockey programs doing it? Well, they're doing it. Some youth, and I'm talking youth wrestling programs. How are they doing it? I don't know, but some of them are reopening. Yeah. So
I think, and part of that is we put together a plan when this kind of all started too, of our COVID attack plan per se for different programs and how it would look like if we were to open up and offer the programs and it's quite an undertaking, and I think anyone that's doing it understands that too, and that's those people that are doing it they obviously have their plan of attack and they're putting that into practice. We had some of that, put some of that together to be prepared if that was the case, and it's most of them are doing it in they're changing the way they're delivering the programs over the years past, whether it's not doing full teams and doing smaller pods and smaller groups. That's that's kind of number one, and a lot of these programs that are happening is just keeping them in smaller groups and to be able to effectively trace where that's coming from, and then just eliminating a lot of the spectator lingering issues. I think is also a big thing if there's practices and or games. A lot of these, for example, the ones that are renting the fields and they turn in their plan, a lot of them are 0 spectators, even though they were allowed to have spectators based on where they're at, the facility they're at, whether it's indoors, outdoors. A lot of them just said, which I think is easiest at this point, is no spectators. So each one's a little bit different. My son's in a soccer program, and it's one adult on the sideline, and they have to come in their pod, and it's just you get in and you get out. There's no, that's what we're doing for the warming house. We're looking at a warming house plan, is looking at warming house is warming house. You're in 15 minutes and you're out, and there's not, it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of change, just delivering the programs differently, maybe less of a league and more of a clinic or smaller team.
That's nice to hear that you are we're gonna have our hockey and ice skating rinks open and the warming houses will be open.
That's the plan right now, is we're putting that stuff together, and
Good.
Obviously, things change, but I know they want to have the rinks open and putting together the plan for the staff and policies for usage of that, and then going to look at putting together an educational piece for the community to be able to put that information out there, because the usage is going to change if we are able to open them this year.
It's good to hear.
Well, Neil, I'm going to put you on hold, and Chris, you have joined us. Chris Cost from the YMCA is on. Chris, if you can unmute yourself and say hi, we'll test your audio and see if you're connected. I know you were having some trouble earlier getting in, so I hope you can hear me. You're still muted if you're trying to talk.
There we go.
Hey.
There we go.
Welcome.
Hey, sorry everybody. I apologize for being late. I was in between locations and traffic was bad.
No, I believe it. So, Chris, let me ask you this question. So you obviously know this is the Park and Recreation Task Force put together by our city council to kind of think about ways that the city of Maplewood can deliver recreation services differently post-COVID, obviously we're in a financial pinch along with every other city in the region. And we have a special relationship with the YMCA, and we're often, sometimes we're competitors and sometimes we're allies. And this group really wanted to hear from you, kind of how the YMCA is doing and what you think your future looks like. And then what are potential ways that our entities could partner together to make sure that both are a success, because you're a central piece of our community. And so maybe give us a little bit of background about you, your experience at the YMCA now post or in the midst of COVID, and then talk a little bit about the future. And then what we'll do is we'll have everybody kind of ask questions and go. So if you can give us a 5 to 10 minute summary of where things are at, we can go from there.
Yeah, perfect. I tried to log in my computer. My computer decided to do an upgrade, so I'm trying to call from my phone. Signal's not always the best here, so we'll go the best I can. So my name is Chris Cost, and I've been with the Y for 12 years. The last 5 years, I have been the executive director at the YMCA in Hudson. And during COVID, as of March 16th, when we shut our buildings down, we pivoted to some other avenues to support community. And in the process of being shut down for 3.5 months, we did see some major financial struggles. And so coming out of being closed and reopening, we went through a staggered phase of reopening our buildings. In the process of that, we went through a major restructuring and reorganization of our entire association, trying to be proactive and trying to be thoughtful thinking forward. We restructured and we went to more of a regional approach with some of our key leaders, myself included. And part of that was extending the responsibilities. And so my role has been expanded from not only the executive at the YMCA in Hudson, but the executive at the Maplewood YMCA Community Center and the White Bear Lake YMCA. We reopened our branches starting in June, and White Bear opened in mid-July, and then Maplewood opened in just in the middle of August. What I can tell you is that of all of our locations, Maplewood is probably one of the top 5, 6 strongest ones right now in regards to attendance. We are seeing anywhere between 45 and 55% pre-COVID numbers, and basically what that number is looking at last year's date, comparing it to this year's date. So we still, are not near where we want to be, but we also realize that during this time, we're very happy to be open and provide services to the community of Maplewood. Swim teams have been using the pool. Our fitness center and classes have been pleasantly, surprisingly busy during peak times. Afternoon times are a little quieter. Our group exercise class, we normally offer about 120 of those pre-COVID. We're offering about 60 right now, with the goal of increasing those as we continue to see members come back. In regards to activities in sports, we did run a flag football program this fall through the Y, which with very good success. Our numbers were about 75% of what we've done pre-COVID. Part of that, we realized that families just needed something for their kids to do. They needed to get outside. We did it safe, we did it effectively, and we wrapped it up with a we call it the Y Cup, where we bring teams from all over the Twin Cities together in a one-day flag football tournament. And it was a very successful day. We were also approached by the Women's Volleyball League that had been taking place at the Maplewood Y through the rec department for many years. And in October, we started the Women's League with 18 teams playing. They play on Wednesday nights, and so far we've had positive results from that. Overall, the YMCA's Maplewood is part of the YMCA of the North, which is a third largest YMCA in the United States, 26 locations. And I will tell you that combined, our 26 locations and camps across the state, which have been part of the YMCA of the North, we're projecting to lose about $80 million this year. That's a little less than half of our operating revenue. With our budget cuts and savings that we've put in place, we're projected to lose about $30 million this year. Thank goodness that we have endowments that are available for times like this, but it still does hurt, and it still does have an impact on all of us. We're all stretched a little bit thin with added responsibilities, but we know that although there will never be a normal, we know that we're heading towards somewhat of a normalcy, especially as we see numbers hopefully start declining, vaccines and other things. But we've been pleasantly surprised with the attendance of our participants, from our swim teams to swim lessons to our sports programs. I could go on, but I'll save you the time.
Yeah, I want to stop you because I know that was a lot of information. So I'm sure folks have questions for clarity. So I'm going to ask them in order to see if they have any questions. So I'm going to go Neil, Vicky, then Bill. Neil, do you have any questions about operational things or questions around revenue from the YMCA in terms of bodies or numbers or anything? Neil, do you have any questions that you would want to ask?
No, not specifically, no.
Okay, Vicky, then Bill, then Mike.
Yeah, I do have just a curiosity, Chris. So you said that the YMCA picked up the women's volleyball league that was running through Maplewood Parks and Rec. What did that entail? What is the Y doing for that?
Oh,
Chris, can you hear me? Ken, you're muted. We'll get him back. Don't worry.
yeah. He may be switching to his computer
He
from
could
his
be.
phone.
Yep.
There he is.
You're still muted, but I can see you, Chris.
I did lose you for a second, but I'm back.
So the question was, what did you have to do to take over the women's volleyball league? What kind of extra precautions did you do, or what kind of extra mechanics did you have to do to take over women's volleyball?
Yeah, so part of the process we went through with women's volleyball, we did have our protocols in place at the Y in regards to wearing masks, hand sanitizing, washing hands, screening protocols before coming in the building. We also were able to share with each team what our protocols were. We did limit individuals from gathering to watch. We had teams that were and are a normal size for their team, but not a lot of extra team members. So we didn't have teams of like 12, 13, 14. We had just the minimum number of team members plus a few additional. And they knew that if people were gone, then they'd have other people on their roster that would be subs. So we did not have large numbers in our gym. We did close down our gym. We did close down our gym on Wednesday night. So all that's going on is volleyball. We don't have any other activities going on.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Vicki, did you have any other questions for Chris?
No, I think that's it for me.
Okay, Bill, then Mike, then Aaron, please.
I just have one question, Chris. For all your activities, do you use your own facilities? I'm thinking about flag football. Wondered how that worked and what facilities do you use?
So for Maplewood, we had kids that we had playing at our White Bear location. And then also we had some traveling teams that were either at the White Bear or at the East location. We did not have the opportunity to have conversation with the city about using city space for flag football, but flag football is probably one of our strongest programs that we've been running for a number of years, and actually do NFL flag, which is very popular with youth and parents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Bill?
No, I'm good.
Mike, then Aaron, then Beth, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Chris, Mike Erickson here, a 22-year member of the MCC, YMCA. Something I shared with the group last week, but I hadn't been back to the MCC in 7 months. And so I called ahead and spoke with Cynthia, and she gave me the dollar tour and showed me exactly everything that you guys are doing from a protocol, from a safety perspective. And I've since returned. And so I want to offer a compliment to you and the team and your COVID-19 plan that gives us members an opportunity to get back in there in a safe manner. And I appreciate that. Appreciate the work of the staff and everything that you folks are doing to take a step forward in the right direction. And even though the numbers are down, it's good and it's positive to be in there.
Chris, you're muted, but I can see you just fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I keep losing signal. I'm trying to move around my office. My computer does not want to load back up, so we'll see how I'm doing now.
Well, right now you're good. Aaron, do you have any? So we'll go Aaron, then Beth, then Nolan.
I will not move.
Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Chris, thanks for being here. You mentioned Maplewood's numbers were relatively high for participation. Any insights into why that might be, or what Maplewood is, what the Y is doing right?
Well, I will tell you that before we opened up, we did an extensive, extensive research with the Minnesota Department of Health, the Wisconsin Department of Health, and the CDC. We also reached out to YMCAs across the United States that opened up before we did. The Atlanta YMCAs, the Florida YMCAs, the Philadelphia YMCAs opened up probably a month before we did. And so we took a lot of their learnings. We also made sure that we went above and beyond with our cleaning. We stepped it up. We increased our cleaning staff, our cleaning capacity, how often we clean the high touch points. And then we actually moved our check-in points to the front doors. So individuals felt that we were checking people in right from the very beginning, asking them the screening questions. Overall, we survey our members every 90 days. And our survey results in regards to feeling safe, feeling the buildings clean, were some of the highest numbers across the United States from the company we use, which is MXM, which does a lot of surveys for fitness facilities all across the United States. We did not take this lightly because we knew that our livelihood depends on members being in our branches. It's not perfect. Even today, it's like pulling teeth to get people to wear masks on all the time. And we are reduced staff because of the impact. But every day it's another day and we keep trying.
Good. Aaron, anything else? Beth, then Nolan, and then Dorothy. We're asking questions of the YMCA.
Chris, I'm Beth Watchrood. I am with NEU Soccer Club, and we had summer practices, and a few teams had a fall league. But I also work at the LA Fitnesses in the Metro, and I would say our numbers are pretty low. The mornings are slower. They are getting a little bit better. I teach fitness classes, and yeah, the numbers are pretty low. But I guess in the afternoons it does pick up. Do you guys have your childcare open or not yet?
We do have our childcare open. We opened it up probably about a month and a half ago, and I will tell you that our numbers aren't as strong as they were before COVID, and there's a couple reasons for that. We know that a lot of families are working from home now, and so where normally day their kids to the Y when they're working out. Now one of the spouses can stay home or one of the partners can stay home with the kids. So they don't need it as much. But what we do have open is in the mornings we have 2 time slots open, which are an hour and a half each. And then we have 15 minutes of cleaning in between. And then the evenings we have 1 slot open roughly between 5 and 6, 5:30 and 7. That correlates with some of our group exercise classes.
Beth, any other questions?
How many kids come in, do you think?
You know, our numbers at Maplewood, you're probably looking at 10 to 15 during a time frame, which normally we'd be seeing 30 to 50.
Wow.
But we've also had to reduce the space. So in Maplewood, we converted a racquetball court into a really incredible play maze. And then we've had to shut that down because it's not safe to operate during these COVID times.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Good. Thank you for that. Anything else? Nolan, then Dorothy, then Bryce, please.
I don't have anything, any questions for him. So.
Okay. Dorothy, do you have any questions for the YMCA? You're muted, Dorothy. I can't hear you. No, not yet. Still can't hear you.
Got
There
it. Okay.
There we go.
I don't have any questions, and I apologize for being late. The dog insisted it was time to go out. It's really snowing out there. If you haven't looked out, we're getting accumulation rapidly.
You get the weather report, and dogs will always come first.
Yes.
We'll go Bryce and then Bao next, please. Bryce. Bryce, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Sorry, I'm having some technical issues here. Hold on 1 second.
No worries. You sound great.
We'll blame it on the weather.
There we go. You just need to unmute yourself again.
You'd think I'd have this figured out by now.
Questions for the Y?
Hey, Chris, thanks for being here. No, I'm from Little Canada. I don't have any questions, so I'm simply just kind of observing, and I appreciate you talking about your business. So thank you.
Good. Bao, any questions for Chris from the Y?
No, actually, I think Christy already asked my question, so I don't have any, but I appreciate being here. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Chris, I have a couple of practical questions for you. We've been talking about programming for both youth and adults. Have you seen bigger jumps in a desire for more kid activities or more adult activities since you've reopened? Where have you seen sort of the most interest?
So if you let me step back a little bit, before COVID, the Y offered 7 sports a year for youth and 3 sports for adults. We definitely see more of the youth sports, but we did start seeing more and more of the adults that wanted a sports outlet. Now that we're in COVID, we are seeing the parents that want the sports, but we're also seeing more adults. I actually was contacted yesterday by a futsal group that want to come in and play, want to create a futsal league with us. And if you don't know what futsal is, it's an indoor soccer. We have interest for men's basketball leagues, so we're exploring that as well, since we did kick off our basketball season for youth 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And then I have another technical, those 7 sports, are they pretty consistent year over year, pre-COVID? Is this sort of a standard offering for athletics?
Yes, it is. It does vary a little bit from location to location because some locations are, stronger in certain areas. But I would say our number one overall sport is flag football, followed closely by basketball, soccer, then volleyball. We have a really strong track and field program in the spring. We have a golf program at many of our Ys, as well as a t-ball and baseball, softball in some of the locations where the cities do not offer that sport. And then there are a couple locations that we have Frisbee golf programs as well.
Okay. Thank you. I guess maybe one of the questions I want to ask next is if you could describe an ideal partnership with a city community, a really strong robust partnership, what do you think you do better than everybody else, and what do you need from a city partner? And you can make it up. You can say, describe the perfect partner.
Yeah, I don't know if it is what one does better than the other. I think that there are opportunities where in today's world where we try to do more with less, having the opportunity to partner with a city community where the reach is there to reach the families in the community. At the Y, we don't always have the access to reach into our community unless we do mass marketing. But the partnership that we've seen really well in some of our communities, an example in Hastings, the city in Hastings has a really strong relationship when it comes to basketball and some other programs. That is a program that's supported by the city. The YMCA runs it, but both are financially successful because there are financial pieces that go to support the community as well. When it comes to the Y, we really believe in developing the entire person. So our core values of caring, honesty, respect, responsibility are always in all of our programs. We're teaching these kids not to be just good athletes or to be athletes, but also to be good human beings and bring that back into their schools and their communities. Those are some key values that the Y really puts in place that we feel are very valuable to our sports programming.
And how about for adults? Do you see those same values carry forward to adults, or is it shift as they get older?
I think that we are seeing some of that. There's a couple locations that have really strong men's flag football teams. And what we're seeing is some of those teams, they're actually they're being formed by church groups. So men from different churches are developing their own team. They're joining our leagues.
There you go.
Men that are really feeling like kids again, thinking they're kids, but their bodies don't always respond that way. And just having some good camaraderie. I think in today's age, anytime we can have some civil compatibility between teams is really awesome. And we're seeing that in our women's league, women's volleyball league. So I don't think it's the same as with our youth, but we do try to install those same values in our leagues.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Bombs or whatever, but in the long run, it's pretty mellow.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Mike?
Go ahead.
Chris, that was great. Really appreciated. How do you lead or instill those kinds of values by selecting coaches, or what exactly transpires? Because, it sounds virtuous, but I just wonder how it gets done.
Yeah. So the Y is a lot of community groups. We really depend on our on volunteer coaches, and the volunteer coaches, we do have a meeting with all of our volunteer coaches before the league season start, and we share with them what the expectations are of the league and what the expectations are for our kids. we realize that there's occasionally that parent that wants to make the next NFL star out of their 5-year-old. But we also have to let them know that these are kids, and we want to remember that we're supposed to have fun. And if all else, it's that sportsmanship that we want to be on top of anything else. And that's one thing that I think with our flag football program and working with the NFL flag really has a lot of the same emphasis in the values of youth sports.
Thank you.
Other questions, people who, like I said, put in the chat box, just wave your hand or raise your hand or unmute. Is other questions about the why in terms of their philosophy or their approach or their business model? Mike Erickson's trying to unmute himself, so there we go.
I am, Chris. So again, as we move forward and take small steps, so you're saying that the Y is going to be able to have some youth basketball leagues starting up here soon?
Yeah, we already have some basketball going on at many of our locations.
Okay, and how are you doing that in terms of, I mean, because that's one of the reasons our associations, the people on this task force represent other associations that their kids play in our youth basketball league, which is huge. It's enormous.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing, an example is in Hudson, is that we're really not focused on the traveling portion of the leagues.
Right.
No,
Yep.
because there are some that have the in-house and the traveling.
Yep.
What we look at is more the in-house, and we are doing minimal numbers in our groups. So instead of having groups of like 12 to 15, we're having 7 to 9. And then with a coach that makes 10. We're also limiting the numbers that are on our courts. So if you take a basketball court, a 4 basketball court, we would have, if we're playing the whole gym, it'd be 10, but since we're doing half, we're doing 10 on a side. Which has made us actually have to offer more time slots to accommodate more of the groups. But then again, they're wearing masks when they're not actively playing.
Yep.
So when they're getting instruction, we're making them wear their mask. But anytime they're actively playing and there's an increase in heart rate or breathing, they can't remove their masks. Otherwise, we're just we're really trying to monitor and try to limit the interaction, the contact, which we'll get some of that.
If I could, Chris, so there's no parents sitting on the sidelines watching the games anymore?
We will have one parent in the gym. That's it, especially with our youngers. With the older kids, anything that's, second grade or up, we'll have one parent that can be in our lobby that has windows overlooking our gym. Okay.
All right.
Wow.
Well, you're giving us information that, and again, our staffers for the city of, this is good information for us in a way that if you can do it, can we do it and do it safely?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Nolan and quite frankly, everybody else who's representing the association, they're doing it. So could we do it? And that's of course a question for Neil Brenneman, who organizes our basketball leagues with our neighboring cities. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Other questions that folks want to ask? Go ahead, Neil.
Hey, Chris, good to see you again.
Hello there.
Good. So just a question, what's for like the youth sports? I know you mentioned for flag football, you partner with the NFL flag football. Are there any for youth sports and activities? Are there other groups that you partner with, or are the other ones more like in-house, taught by staff, or led by staff or volunteer coaches? And as flag football, we used NFL flag football before too, and they're really good. I was just curious about the other ones and how you operated those other ones.
Yeah, did I lose you or did you lose me?
Nope, you're good. We can hear you just fine.
Yeah, so curriculum for all developed with our coaches. We have.
Well, now I did lose you, Chris. We'll get him back. This is technical difficulties.
and different associations. So
Chris?
some of our, yeah.
Can I have you repeat everything you just said one more time?
Yeah, let me rewind myself.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me see where it's starting.
Partners.
All of our sports, we do have in-house specialists. So if it's track and field, if it's volleyball, if it's soccer. Hudson, we do some with the Hudson Basketball Association, and some others. So we do look for opportunities to partner. We don't look at this as competition, because in the big picture, we look at how do we keep kids active. We're in the time frame right now where statistics show that our kids will not live as long as their parents because of obesity and some other issues. So we just want to see kids active. And if we can partner together with others to do that, it's just more kids being able to be active. We also realize, and we have a triangular approach to all of our sports, where if you look at a triangle and you look at our schools, you might start at the bottom of the triangle, the widest part of the triangle, where you might have 300 kids that are playing. By the time you get to the top, that's 11th, 12th grade, you might have 10 to 15 of those kids. What happens to all those kids that drop out? So the Y wants to make sure that we're in a spot where we can support those kids that are no longer on the traveling or feel like they can be varsity or junior varsity. We run intramural programs in school districts for kids that still want to play, but they're not in the high school league. So we look for ways that we can get youth active and engaged and involved, maybe not the level that they're competing with against other cities on our junior varsity levels, but we want to keep them engaged some way or another.
I guess maybe I have one more question, and this is so obviously the city's facing financial challenges with COVID, and we are rethinking our service offerings and our partnership model, and thinking about collaboratives and regional efforts. How would we engage the YMCA on being a partner, and what would you think about a broader conversation?
To be blunt and honest with you, across the United States, cities have time and time again tried to be engaged in fitness and in sports, and some facilities, some communities can do it really well, but knowing that there are financial struggles, if there's an organization, if it's the Y or any other organization that wants to come and support and partner alongside, I would recommend it. In the case of the YMCA, we have myself representing Maplewood, as well as our executive director who oversees one location, but also our whole sports program. It would be as simple as a conversation to look at what would that partnership or opportunity look like that would be beneficial to all concerned. That's my Rotary person coming out right there. For us, again, it's how can we support the communities that we're in, and that's what we're wanting to do in Maplewood. If it's the community center, if it's food distribution, if it's coat drives or whatever, we just want to be able to support the community that we're in. And if there's ways we can do that together, then albeit.
Excellent. Any final comments from the group?
I have another question for Chris. So Chris, when this gets back to discussions we've had at a couple of our meetings, and traditionally municipalities, cities, when they set their rates for recreation activities, they're really loss leaders. There's no way you're going to actually cover all of your costs. How do you set your price points for your rates to the kids? And would you say that you're generally speaking a little higher than cities, if I could put that out there?
I would say that when we look at our rates, we may be a little higher, but not much. If we compare our basketball rates in Hudson compared to Hudson Basketball Association, we come in less. Flag football, we come in less than some of the other communities that do their their own. I mean, not saying community cities doing it, but other organizations within cities. The one thing that the Y does bring as well is that we don't turn anybody away. We have scholarship programs for our youth. And I will tell you that in general this year, or on a given year, we're probably awarding over $100,000 for kids to participate in sports throughout the Twin Cities.
That's
So to answer
fantastic.
your
Thank
question-
you. Thanks for sharing that.
There's probably, depending on the city, there's probably a little bit of change. I mean, the city rates in Minnetonka would be different than the city rates of, East St. Paul, just because of the demographics that you're in.
Yep.
But we try to look at the market.
Thank you, Chris.
And make sure that our rates are equal to market rates.
Any other questions for Chris?
I have one.
Go ahead, Bill.
What would you need right now, Chris? What's your dream about the programs, assuming we can get over COVID-19?
Am I looking at in general or in Maplewood?
I'm Maplewood City Council. I guess I'll go Maplewood.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
on the task force, we've got others, Little Canada and Oakdale, and we got a big
South
representation.
St. Paul.
What I would look at is when I came to Maplewood, and actually I graduated from Stillwater, so very familiar with the Maplewood area. But when I came to Maplewood, I drove around the community and looked at all the parkland that you have, and just imagined how we could fill those parks with kids playing flag football, soccer programs, other opportunities for youth of all ages to be engaged on that city land, but also to see the parents that are reliving their youth through their kids, which I think all of us want to have a kid that, is better than we were when we were younger. But I think that would be the opportunity to see how we could pull community together as well. I totally believe that diversity and inclusion is very important when we look at sports as well as life. And what better way for me when I played sports to get comfortable with people that weren't like me, but playing sports and being on a team together and learning that even though my skin color may be different, we're a lot alike and a lot the same. So it taught me some lifelong lessons I use still today. So I think some of those pieces are very important. As well as, the promise of the YMCA since we began the Y over 175 years ago is to help strengthen community. And I think that's the big thing for the Y perspective is how can we strengthen the Maplewood and surrounding areas when it comes to the opportunity for sports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody else with a question. And Chris, I know you are you're a busy guy with 3 Ys that you're trying to operate effectively. So we're gonna.
Did you say 3 wives?
No, my wife would kill me for that.
3 wives? Oh,
I heard.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
3 YMCAs that you're trying to run, and you're doing a great job. And I just want to say, when you came to do food distribution, the YMCA got together and distributed. We helped, but you were the source of nearly 500,000 boxes of food in the community, and 144,000 boxes, I think, at the time.
67 tons of food we gave out.
Yeah,
right.
Really remarkable work. So, Chris, thank you. You go back to work, and just know that we appreciate you and the work you do, and we would love to continue this conversation around partnership.
And you know what? I'm always available for conversation or questions. Mike, you have my email. If people have questions, they can feel free to email me. If you'd like to have a future meeting, I would get Molly engaged as well. I've already talked to Molly, and so she knows I'm having conversations with you today. But we'd love to continue the conversation in any aspect of how we can support the community.
Excellent. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity.
Yep.
Have a lovely day. Drive safe, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. So he's busy and I don't want to take up, we could talk to him for another hour if that was something that he was willing to do, but I know he's busy and he's too polite to say that he's too busy. So what's one thing that you heard or stuck out for you from this conversation with Chris from the Y? What's something that you think is something we want to make sure that we capture?
Somebody's figured out how to do youth basketball.
Yeah.
I heard that loud and clear.
I heard a loud value statement, which I think from what I've observed, my kids in community sports, everybody kind of feels that way. But I think these, the Y seems very determined, and I like that. And I like what he said, that they really focus on smaller cohorts. So I imagine that means kids get to play a lot more. They defer to traveling, as people ascend into to competition and the capability. I like that. So
good. Other learnings or reflections? Beth, go ahead.
I liked, he said, the opportunity to do more with less. And then he mentioned that, Maplewood, the surrounding areas have like great parks, spaces that, we can utilize, and we can 6 feet distance apart. I know a lot of my kids have done soccer and hockey now through COVID. And so far it's been good. No illness or anything from the teams or anybody on them. So I know it's possible. And I just think we have a great opportunity to partner with groups and other cities around us and have a great place to actually have some fun with our families and friends. So
good.
One thing that stuck out to me is I'm a YMCA member, and we used to go to the Y every single day, me and my kids. We really miss it. We haven't been back, but I'm not surprised that he said that there are a lot of people still going to the Y, because pre-COVID, it was a super busy place, and it was a gathering place for families as well as seniors. And so I think that's a really important factor for us to keep in mind, that people in Maplewood are interested in doing that, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of volume. Thank you. Other reflections or things that stand out for you?
I have one, Mike.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, as we, we're kind of leaning towards some kind of partnership, cooperative, something like that. I'm just wondering, what the record is on YMCA's and whether they need to control everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he sounds like he's got a program, and he was, he lives it and earns it. He's a great guy. Don't get me wrong, but it sounds more like, this is a mantra, that this is how we do things. I just, just wondering how any of the associations and others feel about how a cooperative would work. I mean, everybody in the community, I'd like to, maintain a certain amount of control, not a dominion, but certainly control. Anyhow, long question. Sorry, anyone, Mike?
No, that's good. That's a good point. Yep.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Mike, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, moving forward, I think I mentioned it at the last meeting or meeting before it with the other city manager colleagues that are out there that do have similar partnerships. What are they doing or not doing? And the two specific ones I'm aware of, the city manager in Mounds View, they don't have a good relationship. The YMCA is pulling out. Andover is another big success story there. What are they doing, as well as Lino Lakes? And I think moving forward to find out what the other ones are doing, we're fortunate that we do have a good working relationship, and with our sister cities in Hudson and certainly White Bear, that's a good thing.
Good thing, right?
I do think, though, that we talk a lot about youth sports, but there's a lot of other audiences that Parks and Recs should be or has historically worked for and had programs and activities for. And so I feel like we do need to clarify that a little bit.
Sure.
Yep.
So that we're not only focused on one user group, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That why, oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I think that's an interesting point and one that I wanted to talk about later, so maybe I'll just mention it now. But as you remember kind of Neil's presentation, he had kind of those 4 categories of youth athletics and adult athletics, youth programming and adult programming. There might be in our recommendations, you might actually take those 4 things and say, well, if it's going to be athletics, we would say partner with the Y would be 1, partner with associations number 2, deliver our own athletics would be number 3. And then staff knows to go do that kind of work. And then when it comes to youth programming, it might be city number 1, school community ed number 2. You know, you might sort of say, this is going to be the area of focus in each of these 4 categories. That might be a way to frame up the recommendation. So we don't lose the things that are important in the community. The other thing is, and this is where I am the bearer of bad news, is that everything has to have that layer of financial support over the top of it. So in that, as you think about recommendations, choosing to rank those in a priority ranking is also going to be an important piece. So if the city council says, look, all we've got is 50 grand, where do you want to spend it? You got to really be focused around where it has the most value. If the city council says, well, listen, we're going to get $8 million and we're going to do whatever we want, it's a slightly easier problem. But as we think about what we're going to frame up as a recommendation, I think Vicky's point is good, and I'm trying to wrestle with how to ultimately write something that makes sense. That's why I've been taking all of your notes as best I can. But any final comments on kind of the WISE perspective? And
well, it was just a comment, really. It was encouraging to hear that as someone who's up there, not every day, but just about every day, and certainly before COVID, it was nice to hear that an 18-team women's volleyball league has gotten going. You know, I'm up there on Wednesday nights, and I watch them when I'm walking or running around the track. Again, positive steps, small steps, but positive steps, and that's what we need to look at.
Now, maybe can I add? I really appreciated his detailing the kind of care they're taking to provide a safe location for the kids and adults that are participating in the programs. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. Our numbers in Minnesota are still going up. I don't think we can sit back and relax. We have to be vigilant. And it sounds as if the Y is doing a pretty good job of that.
Can I want to add to that too. I think this is great to hear from the Y, but how about we also look into the future and see if we can, instead of having in-person activities, can we plan other virtual activities and look to see if the city even have a budget to make that possible. So instead of just having everyone come in person, because as our number in our county continue to grow, we're at a 60% as of today. As those numbers continue to increase, we don't want to discourage or turn anyone away as to why it's demonstrating that. But how about we plan other activities? We give that option of in person or just virtually.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
It's a good idea.
Yep.
And maybe that partnership discussion, maybe it includes that sort of a category of youth, adult, and then virtual in each of those 4 categories. Maybe that's a way to sort of think through. Because I don't know so I'm going to put my HR hat on. When you have a number of employees, I mean, you really want to make sure that you have the skills and the capabilities to deliver these really well. And so, choosing what we're going to be good at or what we're going to deliver helps us, go find the right staff to deliver the right kind of programs that the community needs. So I think as you think through that, we might have to think through some of our job descriptions and those kinds of things. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Anyone else sort of final comments or reflections? I think the one thing that I think was important that for me was the level of learning that they did from other places. They learned how to open well because Atlanta didn't open well. They learned how to open well because different places that they learned. So they do have a sort of a culture of learning, which I think is really good for us. I think that gives us a lot of confidence that they think about these things really well. The one thing I didn't ask that I wish I had is if they are going to lose $30 million, how long can they sustain the losses? And I didn't want to put him on the spot, and maybe he's not the right person to answer that question, but there's a lot of competition for recreation resources, private, nonprofit, city, and someone in that entity knows the date that they have to make some really hard choices, and it's a reality. And so I think sooner we can get acting on this conversation is probably better for them and better for our residents. So I just put that out there.
Mike, to that point, I have a question for you, Beth, because you brought it up. I didn't know you taught at LA. Tell us what the real world is out there, and sort of, you said the numbers are really small. And again, how long is that going to be sustainable? And do you feel safe? We've got the one over here that I've got a couple of friends. They feel safe, but they go right away in the morning.
Yeah, I feel safe too. You walk in, you can only go in one door.
Yep.
You walk in, you scan your badge, and we have a hand sanitizer, footless or a foot pump hand sanitizer.
Yep.
So no hand sanitizer.
Yep.
We don't have our childcare open.
Yep.
We recently, we have the pool open, the hot tub open now, the sauna open, the fitness room. But if you do a fitness class, you have to stay in your 6 foot kind of circle.
Yep.
They're offering more classes, but my classes are never full. So I never run it's not a crowd, right? I've had 10 was the max, and that was like a one day deal. I've mostly had 5 or less in my classes, which used to be 15.
Actually, we'll run it.
So what else? No childcare. But hand sanitizer everywhere. We have spray bottles to wipe down all the equipment and toweling to wipe down all the equipment before and after. I do feel, you have to wear a mask in and out.
Yep.
And when you're doing the hand weights and the equipment, but in the cardio room, you don't need to wear a mask. And on the cardio machines, you also don't need to wear a mask when you're exerting.
Yep.
More. I do feel safe. It feels clean. The locker room, we only have, 6 lockers per group open. So it's probably
they spaced them out too at the MCC. Yeah, same idea, same concept. Yeah.
Maybe 10% of them are open or something.
Yep.
The sinks are only, like half of the sinks are open.
Yep.
All the bathrooms are open. But yeah, it's I guess the evenings are more people come in the evenings. I work in the mornings, so it's a different crowd. And again, we don't have the childcare open, so maybe that's the problem. The parents can't bring in their kids. And then maybe the older crowd is a little bit nervous about coming, but I still have older people coming to my classes. Yep. So there's still all ages at the gym, but just less. So
good to know. Good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say one more thing.
Yeah, no, please.
That Chris said that I thought was good. He talked about like principles that they have, and their goal is to create like a whole child who, is not just about physical being active, but also that social aspect of it. And I think for our purposes, it would be nice to have something like that. I'm sure the Parks and Recs already has, you know, a set of goals or a purpose, something like that for us to kind of check ourselves that whatever we're recommending is gonna be meet the goals of the Parks and Recs, I guess.
Yes. Beth gave a thumbs up in agreement with that. I think that's a really important piece. And I don't know that this group is going to solve it by December, but I think it's one of those recommendation pieces that says the city should establish some operating norms or some operating values, and really just sort of define the philosophy. Is it about access, or is it about healthy living? Is it about just providing opportunity, or is it about establishing robust programs that meet the needs of certain specific communities? And so, Neil, I'm sure that's right in your wheelhouse in terms of how you guys think about it, and probably why you got into the business at some level. So, appreciate that. I think one of the other things that I am struck by, partially because this also came up in the Nature Center Task Force, is the Nature Center has grounds, it has a building, it has sort of trails and things, and the city does have buildings and it has grounds that are really valuable. So that piece, I think, is whatever recommendations and discussions come, I think the actual physical assets is one of those categories. Just because when you own parks and parks are valuable, that becomes a thing that the city sort of has to say, listen, this is one of the great amenities we have, and it's an important part of any kind of conversation. And so I think those things make sense to have as a part of the recommendation. How do we best use the earth, so to speak, the land that we own? How do we best use that? Ought to be one of that. Mike, you were going to say something?
I did, to that point, because you heard him loud and clear. We'd love to have everyone. What are we at? 30? Neil, what do we got? 36, 38 parks? Yeah. At any rate, to see 36. To see kids and or families playing, and I've mentioned it several times. Right at the end of my street, I play Crest Park, and that's a lot of real estate, and there were a lot of the pickup volleyball games with families going on. Of course, we got a brand new playground there that's done, but then we've got also we had some pickup soccer games that took place there very successfully this summer. And then Neil, are we getting a new tennis court, or is that in the future? Is that going to be a pickleball court?
That's TBD.
So it's going to be a what? Oh, TBD. Yeah. But at any rate, you heard him loud and clear, and it's great. We've got a great park system. We got a lot of real estate that, quite frankly, has got to be maintained and mowed. And the encouraging thing there is, neighbors love parks. We love we love to gather. We love to build community, and I mean that's one of the reasons why people move to cities is the park. Besides the education, certainly the park system.
Is there any broad objection to including physical assets as a category for recommendation? Is there any reason why we wouldn't put that out?
Oh, we have to. It's all about the physical. It's all about the physical plant. Yeah.
It's capacity.
Okay. What are the other?
Do you staff that task force too?
I do.
The nature.
Yeah.
Okay. In your spare time. Thanks.
Listen, I love night meetings. This is if I didn't work in it, I'd be in it. So you know what I mean? Like I'm wired to love this stuff. So I hope that comes across. I mean, I genuinely like it. One of the other categories that I keep hearing about is partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is an obvious category, right? Whether it's the Y or an association or a school district or every other city in the East Metro, partnership has to be a broad category. A third category that I've been hearing about is what I call the business model. And that is kind of goes back to Neil's chart from last week. Youth and adult athletics, youth and adult programming, and then adding that category of virtual in all of those things. So are there any pieces to the sort of the business model or the service model that we're missing or that you want to emphasize over others?
I don't know if this fits into that, Mike, but some things that I've been thinking about is, so we talk a lot about associations, for example, but to me, that's there's a certain level of commitment to that, right? And then there's, something that's maybe more recreational, and that's not so much of a commitment, right? It's maybe once a week or something. So I think that has to be a factor in what types of programming that would be offered. And then also pricing and fees, which we've talked a lot about, should be a consideration. Again, when we talk about associations, that might be a higher price point versus something that might be more recreational. And I think those need to be worked into the business model as well.
You were one step ahead of me. We'll talk about that piece. Dorothy, go ahead.
I think somehow the first part, the parks and the land, that the assets that we have, we need to take those categories and overlay and intermix those. So we've got all these activities we're going to do. Which ones can we put onto our own land and make use of? Kind of cross-reference those. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It's incredibly hard to do, and Neil's going to do
I know.
No pressure, Neil, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've been thinking about that very thing as you think about this. Okay.
I mean, just from the things that we did before, I already got a little bit, you got that plan in there from the things we did before and where they took place, but it's the next step is something different. So.
Yeah. And it might be other activities that happen in the parks that haven't actually been there before. We do something else there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you play flag football in the wintertime out in one of the soccer fields? I don't know.
Yeah,
sure.
Just making use of our.
Beth says yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I made a note on the types of services you offer fits in that business model conversation, whether it's recreational or whether it's pipeline to associations and they do traveling. So I think that'll be an important piece. Finance, both what is the fee structure or what is the right fee mix, and then also a city council conversation, what's the right level of subsidy? If these things made money, everybody would do it. So there's some element of what's the right level of, what's the public good from having healthy, engaged residents? And that's a question that only Bill and his colleagues can answer for our community, but I think it's an important policy question that will frame up as what's the right level of public support and what's the public benefit from providing it. Bill, I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's a hard question.
No, I'm thinking that that what we're really searching for is what they call a productivity improvement. In other words, you can you can leave your inputs the same, and get more out of them, which is a productivity improvement. You can reduce your increase your inputs and get greater outputs. You can do all kinds of things. So we're trying to figure out a productivity improvement. How do we deliver these services a little less expensively? I mean, that's really the heart of the matter. And, sometimes when you partner or do a cooperative, you give up some of your own control and your own freedom. But I hear, in a lot of these conversations about, I've got low numbers in one program and high numbers in others. We have capacity, someone else doesn't. Someone has capacity, we don't. So the idea of a cooperative or something like that is a productivity improvement if it gets us the same or better service for less money. That's a huge improvement. So, I think we need to, solve the problem. The problem that we came with is, we can't afford what we're doing. We like what we're doing. I didn't hear anybody say that they didn't like what we're doing. So we just need to figure out, how do we maintain and grow capacity with fewer resources or shared resources? Maybe others have a niche or a gap in their system that we could fill, and vice versa. My voice is giving out. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right. It's so we've got physical assets, partners, service model, financials. How do folks feel about today? Was a really strong conversation around values and purpose, and it was almost philosophical questions. How do people feel if we made that a category to make a recommendation on, and to really refine? Is it too much? Is it not enough? What are folks' thoughts on conversations around values and purpose and access? I'm not sure how to phrase that question, but it came up a lot. Beth, go ahead.
Well, I think that's a very important part of the program, because when you have values, people want to live in a city that's, has integrity, has sportsmanship, teamwork, togetherness. And, all that would just bring healthy, happy, successful schools, communities, businesses. So I think it's very important to include that into a proposal.
And just to be clear, it doesn't have to be this group that defines it. You might just say, hey, listen, we want the Park and Rec Commission to really dive into. I mean, this is not something that you're volunteering to do, but I think it's saying, look, if you're going to be successful, you need this, and we would recommend that, either we do it or somebody else do it. So it doesn't. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed that you're going to be doing this work for the next 5 years.
Right.
It's not, but I think it seems like it's an important. I haven't heard anybody say they don't want to include it.
And to that extent, Mike, you could share with everybody the city's mission and vision statement, right? Just so that everybody understands that that's an extensive amount of work has already been done to create that. Yeah.
One of the city council has 6 strategic priorities, and the first one is so inclusion. Diversity and inclusion work is one of those central pillars, and so rec programming and access to these things is one of the ways that we do that, is by providing that. So so I think maybe the last category I have is what I loosely called like a regional cooperative. I don't know what the right word is, but kind of what I've heard people say is, Oakdale does this really well, and Little Canada does this really well, and Roseville does this really well. Is there a way to maybe grow a regional entity? Maybe the recommendation is as simple as go forth and make a regional entity. How do people react to that approach? And is it just gut reaction? How do you feel about that category for recommendation?
You're on to something there, Mike. If you could share with everybody how fire departments and mutual aid works. It's the same concept. Go ahead.
One of the things that fire departments do is they blur the lines of boundaries, and so they have a closest unit dispatch. So if there is an actual structural fire in the region, they literally will say the fire unit closest to that geography, closest to that house, will be the first one to respond. And so it doesn't matter if it's from St. Paul or from Maplewood or from wherever, the closest unit, it gets dispatched. And so the city of Maplewood, a city of 40,000 and change population, regularly responds to St. Paul. In fact, responds to St. Paul more than St. Paul responds to Maplewood. One, because we have a really robust fire service, but two, this concept of mutual aid that says, listen, it doesn't matter. No one, if your house is on fire, you don't care what name is on the side of the vehicle. You want a fast response. And so in a lot of areas, we've gotten really good at doing that. In others, we could be better. And so, the model exists. It can work. It does require, I think we've heard the word control a couple of times, giving up a little bit of maybe control, or, it's sort of giving up a little bit to get something more, I think is an important conversation to have. And I think when people are faced with a crisis, control matters a little bit less, as long as your foundation is service and quality, that becomes your goal. So how did I do, Mike? Did I answer that question?
Very good. Yes. Good job.
Felt like a job interview question. I was getting a little nervous right there.
I feel like the regional cooperative would be an important one to include also, because I think that falls into, or it would be one of the options, or one of the major factors in the service model section as well. Like you had mentioned before, having, if we break it into different groups, but then having different priority recommendations for each set group. Regional cooperative may even be one of, I don't know if necessarily a separate category by itself, but it's definitely a very important factor considering what level of priority recommendations may happen under the service model heading. I think it definitely needs to be included somewhere, and I don't know if it, what they're, as far as drawing it out by itself, I don't know what else I guess would be included with that is maybe it's breaking down recommendations for the regional cooperative, areas or groups, or, even looking at what that would be. But yeah, I think it's definitely important in the recommendation portion in some way.
Yeah, I think it also overlaps a little bit with partnerships too, right? Because if we think about, if we partner with like the school district, for example, well, the school district doesn't stop at Maplewood city lines, right? It includes also Oakdale and Lower St. Paul. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are we missing?
Partnerships with the schools.
Yeah. Beth's right. We were either you guys were gonna have a conversation with them, or I don't know if we plan on getting that person in a meeting just like we had with Chris, but absolutely that has to be part of it. And I think to that extent, it's got to be there. It's just got to be there. The community ed portion, you bet.
It's been harder because their focus is on obviously student safety, and so their capacity has been limited just by trying to resolve student safety. So they're not going away. The good news is they're not going anywhere. So we will continue to do outreach, but I would agree, we won't lose the school district. Are there any other categories that we're missing? If we have physical assets, partnerships, regionalization, service models, financial considerations, and then values and philosophy, is there anything that we're missing as a category? All right, so then my next question is, Aaron,
Mike,
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if we want to articulate or even get into the realm of like fundraising as a side from the business model piece. I know Mike talked about sponsorships in the past. I'm wondering about grants or events or donations or silent auctions or some sort of charitable effort to boost people's interest on that front.
Yeah,
That's huge.
I was struck by the YMCA gives away $100,000 in scholarships just in the Twin Cities. I thought that was a pretty remarkable number.
They know how to ask. They do. They know how to ask.
Yeah, they do.
But I think of the success that associations have had, and then I'll give the example. And you know, at the high school level, having coached girls softball, and the parents group, the fundraiser to get the, you know, extra coach, what have you, and all of those sorts of things. We need that has to be part of our new model. We need to think of that, and if that's through the associations, great. But you know, money's everything, and if we can't charge the true cost of that activity, then we need to make it up in some way, shape, or form. And I see Beth wanting to talk, because you guys know how to do it. You know how to raise money with the fundraisers, Beth, right?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, every one of my kids, they're selling pizzas right now.
Yep, there you go. Yep.
There's other things that they did, you know, bagging groceries, but they're not doing that right now.
Yep.
But there is things, you know, you could do in the old world, you know, booyah, or, you know, a big party in the park, you know, and bring food donations and, you know, $10 to try to win a raffle, or, you know, fun things. You're not just giving money. And
so I'm going to share my screen, and it's very short what I've got up there. So it's good. This is a really rough approach, but if you've got 6 category of physical assets, you know, land and building, you've got partnerships as a broad category, and this could be a longer list. You've got kind of this regional approach about having other cities there. You've got a category for a business and service model, and understanding that that's really complicated, because it's got sports, it's got programs, it's got virtual, it's got adults, it's got kids. That's a really, number 4 is a huge category. Financial, you've got fees, you've got sponsorships, fundraising, I meant to write instead of foundations, and then you've got, you know, some level of potential subsidy, and then you've got a value and philosophies question. My question to the group, is there one of these that's more important to tackle first?
Mike, Dorothy.
Yeah, Dorothy, go ahead.
I don't know if it's what needs to be tackled first, but I think in a report that comes out of this, the values and philosophy needs to be first and foremost, and everything else, you know, it's like the touchstone, and we're building everything out from that and referring back to it. And I think we'll have better acceptance in looking for money if we've strongly stated our beliefs in the programs, and what we're looking to change and do.
Okay.
I'm with Dorothy.
Okay.
Okay, I want to add to that. I just want to say that all these are their value points, and it's good to keep these in mind. But if we don't have a deliverable product at the end, we won't have any funds. And even if we have funds, if we can't turn around and use it to our community, then there is no point. But it helps for all of us to consider the value and the philosophy of those in our community, and then to what the city wants, and to hear from the council as well, so that we can align, or we can at least somewhat align to the 2021, the calendar year that they have in plan. So those are just some points to keep in mind. I think during this time with this pandemic, people are not I mean, they're not like they're not generous, but they're very giving. People are just more giving, I feel like, during this time in our community than before. So maybe finding funding is not going to be something that's hard, but it's, do we have youth that's going to come, that are going to come out? Do we have parents? Are we able to ensure that they feel safe? And, you know, like all those things to just consider. That's all.
Yeah. I appreciate it. And I don't mean to suggest that they're going to happen. That we'll go through, maybe we won't go through sequentially, but I don't want to spend a bunch of Neil's time inventorying assets if we have other important work to kind of do. It's more of a sequencing thing. So I think I would tend to agree, about people are looking and willing to give now. I think you all have done it, right? I mean, this is a lot of your time and it's really valuable, and this is going to pay off for a decade. So I want to say I appreciate this group stepping up to do that. So right now I've got values and business and service model kind of rising to the top of things to things to sort of solve for first. Other reflections or other thoughts on?
Mike, you're going to provide us those 6 points if I didn't write
it.
Yep.
The summary will be a little bit better next time because we're actually getting into kind of the meat about what we're doing. Which is why we have 2 more meetings to kind of wrestle with kind of these 6 things about what is the recommendation on these categories and who do we want to include and sort of really sort of framing this up. But other comments or reflections, and I'll put the sticks back up there just to see them again.
Mike, this bill might be a little bit of a fine point, but when you look at regionalization, you're really talking about more of a cooperative structure. A partnership is usually a transaction, like you have a contract, whereas the regional cooperative might have a whole different approach, kind of like a watershed. Doesn't matter what the community is, it has a geography, it has a purpose, and it serves a broader region. But it's a different model than a partnership because, so let's say we can only do one partnership, we're going to do it with the YMCA and that's it. Schools aren't interested and so forth. But you still have the practical side of where are the fields, where are the gyms. I've got 3 kids in one program and 12 in the other, all those things that a partnership might not solve, whereas a cooperative might. Just a thought.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things that I was, that the other task force is kind of wrestling with is sort of sequencing. They were strong on making sure that the building maintained was open, so people had a sense that it was valuable and that it was vibrant. So there was a short term. What are we going to do in the short term to keep it open, and then what are we going to do long term to make sure it's successful? And maybe that's as you think about the recommendations, maybe the short run is 2 partnerships that might buy us 2 or 3 years as we move to a different.
If my thoughts are, you're speaking of the nature center, it's a regional asset. And, as we've mentioned, I think we know that our parks are a regional asset. There are people from St. Paul and other communities that use them a lot. We don't look at cards or license plates or driver's license or where they live or anything. We just, so is there a regional approach to this too?
Yeah. So we have a couple of meetings left. 6 big categories to kind of wrestle with. What we're going to do at our next meeting is sort of take each one and sort of break it apart and help start to put some meat in there. And so what I would ask you to do is we'll send this out to folks, is to think about what would the recommendation start to look like. what would you want to say about each of those kind of areas? And don't worry, I'll send it in an email right after this meeting so you can have them and so you can think about them. But that is kind of really where we're at. And, you know, obviously we'll reach out to the school district, but this is kind of a summary of where we're at. The 6 broad categories. If you think of another one and you wake up in the middle of the night, email and share what it is. And we'd love to think through anything that we're missing or anybody that we really want to have a part of.
I think we got enough categories. We probably need to really focus on criteria, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question for the group, maybe as far as clarification for framing our thoughts coming into next meeting. As far as the values and philosophy, I think they're just, it sounds like there's maybe a couple of various viewpoints on it, whether it would be, are we looking at values and philosophies of programming if we're offering it, or values and philosophy of the city as a whole with regards to programming? Like, does that kind of make sense? Are we looking for, you know, what kind of, you know, kind of on the smaller scale of, you know, here's why programming is important. These are the values you want to instill to participants in the programs, or what kind of buy-in or philosophy or value is placed on programs at a city level, I guess, just as a distinction.
For me, it's more of a question of like, why does Parks and Recs exist? So that we can sort of decide what partnerships fit within our thinking. You know, something like that, I guess.
Good question, really hard to answer, but I think if you think about it in terms of, you know, it can be both, right? It can be really high and it can be really low. It can kind of be all over the place. And so maybe, you know, Vicky's was at a high level, and I think, you know, that might be, but the recommendation could be, right, define this at a high level now and then get really narrow and get really defined 6 months from now or 8 months from now. Because we also, the good thing we have is we do have some time to do this work.
Right. Mike, to that point, question for you on that. I'm looking at my notes from our last meeting. City of was going to do a POCO survey. Will that data be available? And this is for everybody. Remember, we were going to, the city was going to take a pulse to Vicky's point. Was it going to be how important Park and Rec? Is that going to be one of the questions?
It is one of the questions, and
there you go.
I'm going to look up my. We are going to get the results at the end of November.
Okay. So you literally, so you're pushing it out to all of us, right? Pretty soon?
So the way the survey works, and I'll give you a little bit of survey history, and don't judge surveys after the last week. They actually, you know, at a local level, they actually are really great. We direct mailed 2,500 postcards to randomly selected households to answer. That is our base group, 2,500 households. We expect to get 800 to 1,000 responses from those folks in their households. We follow it up with an online version for everybody that we missed.
Yep.
So we have a base of a randomized sample of 2,500, which serves as kind of our core. And then we do a online version to capture other perspectives. And then the data scientists will cross-reference to make sure that there's no outliers. But we are ready to go. We are ready to launch the online version now, but we actually have collected all of the randomized sample data already.
So we will, to Vicky's point, we potentially could have some information, as it were, some data that could may be helpful to us.
It will be helpful.
Good, thank you.
I don't have anything else.
There we go.
I actually got a lot out of this meeting, so I'm super.
My throat is killing me, so yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So we can finish early, huh?
We can finish early. I want to say thank you to everybody. This was, I hope this was as helpful for you as it was for me. I loved the whole thing, and I now have work to do, and this is, I'll be calling you tomorrow. We can talk about it. Really helpful and really, it's great when you just listen to what the group says. You get a lot of clarity, and so I really appreciate everybody's participation. If you want to unmute and say goodbye to your friends, and
thanks everybody.
Super
Thanks.
helpful.